Tom Bennett lived a quiet life on his ranch, far away from the noise of towns and cities. The ranch had been in his family for generations, and every corner of it carried memories of the past. The barn, the wooden fences, the wide fields that stretched for miles, and even the old oak tree by the creek. They all held stories of people who had worked hard, laughed, and sometimes cried on this land. Tom knew every inch of it. He knew where the water ran most cleanly, which pastures were safest for the animals, and which fences needed mending before winter came. Life was steady, predictable, and simple. That simplicity was something Tom valued deeply. He was used to living alone. Years ago, his parents had passed, and his siblings had moved to the city to chase lives full of jobs, schools, and excitement. Tom, however, had stayed. He liked the quiet, the open sky, the way the sun rose over the mountains, painting the fields gold, or how the wind whispered through the grass at dusk. Every morning he woke early, fed the animals, checked the fences, and then spent the day working until the sun dipped low. He didn't need much more than that. Occasionally neighbors would stop by for supplies or a quick chat. But most days Tom's only company was the animals and the soft, steady rhythm of life on the ranch. One evening, as the sky was turning soft shades of pink and orange, Tom was walking along the edge of the pasture, checking the fences that ran along the creek. He had almost finished his daily chores and was thinking about sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee when he heard it, a faint sound that didn't belong in the quiet of the ranch. At first he thought it might be the wind, rustling through the trees, or maybe one of the cows calling to its calf, but then he heard it again, more clearly this time, a weak, desperate voice calling for help. Tom froze. It was unusual to hear any voice on his property, especially at this hour. He slowly followed the sound, moving carefully through the tall grass. The voice came from near the edge of the property, close to the woods that bordered the ranch. As he approached, he saw a young woman crouched down and clutching her arm. She was dirty and scratched, and her clothes were torn in places. Her breathing was quick, shallow, and her eyes, wide with fear, locked onto his. Tom's first instinct was caution. He had lived alone for so long that he trusted his surroundings more than strangers. But then he saw something in her expression that made him act differently. She was terrified, exhausted, and in pain. She wasn't there to cause trouble. She needed help. He took a careful step forward and said softly, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" The young woman's lips trembled. She tried to speak, but only managed a faint whisper. "Please, just make it quick," she said, her voice barely audible. She flinched as if expecting something terrible to happen. Tom realized immediately that she had been running from something or someone, and that time was critical. Without hesitation, he offered her his hand to help her stand. She hesitated for a moment, then slowly took it, her fingers trembling against his. He guided her to the barn, keeping an eye on the surrounding area. Once inside, he helped her sit on a bale of hay. The barn smelled of straw and animals, familiar and comforting to him, but the young woman flinched at every sound. Tom could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her body shook as she tried to catch her breath. He realized she needed more than just a place to sit. She needed care, comfort, and safety. Tom went to fetch some clean water and a cloth. He returned and gently offered it to her. "Here, drink this." "You must be thirsty," he said. She took the water slowly, barely speaking. Tom noticed the scratches on her arms and legs. He grabbed a first aid kit he kept for emergencies and started cleaning the wounds carefully, trying not to alarm her further. She flinched at the touch but didn't pull away, her trust slowly growing. As he worked, he spoke in a calm, gentle voice, telling her small, ordinary things about the ranch. "These cows are stubborn sometimes," he said, trying to distract her. "Yesterday, one of them wouldn't go into the pen for hours." She let out a small, nervous laugh. It was the first sign that she was beginning to feel a tiny bit of safety in his presence. Tom asked her name gently, and she whispered, "Emily." It was clear she wasn't ready to talk about what had happened, but he didn't push. He knew that forcing her to speak would only make her more anxious. Instead, he focused on what he could do right now: tend to her injuries, provide warmth, and make her feel less alone. The night grew darker, and the cold began to settle into the barn. Tom offered her a blanket, which she accepted quietly. They sat in silence for a while, broken only by the occasional rustle of animals in the barn or the wind outside. Tom thought about what he had to do next. He couldn't call the police immediately. He didn't even know exactly what danger she was in or who might be looking for her, but he could keep her safe until morning. That was enough for now. Tom's mind kept returning to the simple truths he had always believed. Help those in need, act with kindness, and stay calm in difficult situations. He had lived his life by these principles, and he knew that even though this was unexpected, he had to act. He moved quietly, gathering extra blankets and setting up a small space in the corner of the barn where Emily could rest more comfortably. He fetched some food, bread, cheese, and apples from the small pantry in the barn and offered it to her. She accepted, eating slowly, still cautious but trusting him a little more. As the hours passed, Tom kept a careful watch over the barn. He listened for sounds from outside for any sign of danger, but the night remained quiet. Occasionally, Emily spoke in a low voice, sharing fragments of her story. She had been traveling alone, trying to escape a situation she couldn't explain yet, but the fear in her voice was clear. Tom didn't ask questions he wasn't ready to hear. Instead, he focused on providing a safe space for her. By the time the moon rose high, casting a silver glow through the barn windows, Emily's breathing had slowed. She was finally able to rest, leaning slightly against the bales of hay Tom had arranged for her. Tom sat nearby, quietly tending to chores that didn't make a sound but kept the barn orderly and safe. He felt a strange mix of emotions: concern for the young woman, awareness of the danger she had fled, and an unusual sense of purpose that this night had given him. He reflected on the life he had always thought was simple. Perhaps simplicity wasn't just about living alone or tending to animals. Perhaps it was also about making choices that mattered, even when they were difficult or unexpected. He realized that in helping Emily, he had stepped into a story far bigger than his own. A story of courage, trust, and compassion. As dawn approached, Tom knew the next day would bring new challenges. He would have to decide how to protect Emily further, and perhaps confront the dangers that had followed her. But for now, he simply sat quietly, watching over her, feeling a quiet determination settle in his chest. The ranch, the animals, and the wide-open fields would continue to be his home, but this night had changed something inside him. He had chosen to act when it mattered, and in doing so, he had become more than just a rancher. He had become a protector. Emily stirred slightly in her sleep, and Tom smiled faintly. For the first time in what felt like a long while, he felt that he had done the right thing. No matter what came next, he knew he would face it with the same calm, steady courage that had guided him throughout his life on the ranch. And as the first light of morning touched the barn, he silently promised himself that he would do everything he could to keep her safe. The morning sun filtered through the cracks in the barn walls, casting warm golden lines across the hay. Emily stirred awake, blinking slowly as she tried to make sense of where she was. The night had been long and exhausting, but for the first time in hours or maybe days, she felt a faint sense of safety. Her injuries still ached, and her clothes were dirty and torn, but the fear that had consumed her lessened slightly as she realized that she was not alone. Tom was already awake, moving quietly around the barn. He had begun his morning routine, feeding the animals, checking the fences, and making sure everything was in order. Even though his mind was on Emily and what might come next, he didn't rush. Calmness, he had learned, often made the difference between panic and clear thinking. He paused for a moment when he noticed Emily watching him, and he offered a small, reassuring nod. "Good morning," he said softly. "Sleep okay?" Emily nodded, her voice still weak. I think so. Thank you for helping me." Her words were simple, but they carried a depth of gratitude that Tom understood without needing explanation. "You're welcome," he replied. "Don't worry about anything right now, just rest as much as you can. We'll figure everything out step by step." Emily tried to smile, but her lips trembled. She shifted slightly, wincing as the pain in her arm reminded her of what she had been through. Tom noticed and went to get the first aid supplies he had cleaned and prepared the night before. He carefully attended to her wounds again, this time more thoroughly, making sure everything was properly bandaged. Emily flinched at first, but she began to relax as she realized that he wasn't just patching her up. He was paying attention and he cared. Once the immediate care was done, Tom offered her a simple breakfast, There was bread, some cheese, and a few apples. Emily ate slowly, still cautious, but with each bite, a little more color returned to her face. She asked no questions about the ranch or Tom's life, and he asked no questions about hers. Not yet. There was a delicate balance of trust forming, one built on patience, quiet kindness, and shared survival. After breakfast, Tom stepped outside to check the property. He wanted to make sure everything was secure before deciding what to do next. From the porch, he looked out at the rolling fields, the distant mountains, and the winding creek that ran past the edge of the ranch. The world seemed calm and peaceful, but he knew danger could be closer than it appeared. Emily had not yet shared the full story, but from the fear in her eyes and the urgency of her plea, he knew that those who were after her would not stop easily. When he returned, Emily was sitting on the hay bale looking out the window. Tom sat nearby, keeping a respectful distance but remaining attentive. He began speaking softly, telling small stories about the ranch, how the animals behaved, the quirks of the cows, and the way the wind changed direction at certain times of day. Emily listened, sometimes responding with quiet words or a small smile. The simple stories of daily life seemed almost magical to her, a stark contrast to the chaos and fear she had been running from. Hours passed slowly, but Emily began to feel more at ease. She shared fragments of her story in bits and pieces, though she was careful not to reveal everything. She spoke of a place she had once called home, of ordinary life that had suddenly turned frightening, and of the people she had been trying to escape. Tom listened carefully, never judging, never pressing for details she was not ready to share. He knew that the first step was to ensure she felt safe, and everything else could follow later. As the day wore on, Tom realized that they needed a plan. Emily could not stay in the barn forever, and the people chasing her would not give up so easily. He began considering the options. He could help her contact the authorities once it was safe. He could move her to a more hidden location on the property, or he could find a way to keep her disguised and protected until she could travel safely. Each choice had risks, but he refused to leave her vulnerable. Emily watched him quietly as he made preparations, her mind torn between fear and hope. She had been running for so long that trust did not come easily. But with each thoughtful action Tom took, her fear slowly transformed into a cautious sense of relief. She realized that he was not only helping her physically, but also giving her something she had not felt in days, a measure of emotional safety. Tom spent the afternoon reinforcing the barn, making it more secure and creating a hidden area where Emily could rest if needed. He moved hay bales to block the entrance slightly, set up extra blankets, and arranged tools and supplies so that they could be used if an emergency arose. Every step he took was careful and deliberate, showing his experience and calm in handling difficult situations. Emily watched in quiet awe, realizing that he was not just a rancher but also a man who could think clearly under pressure. While working, Tom also thought about the human side of the situation. He considered what Emily might be feeling, the exhaustion, fear, and uncertainty that had brought her to his ranch. He tried to imagine the courage it took for her to leave everything behind and seek help from a stranger. It made him admire her silently. He understood that trust was fragile, especially in someone who had been through frightening events. Every action he took was meant to strengthen that trust, even if she didn't realize it yet. By late afternoon, Emily grew restless. She wanted to help, even in small ways. Tom handed her some simple tasks, gathering fresh water from the trough, checking the small vegetable patch, and feeding a few animals. These tasks gave her a sense of control and purpose, which was important for someone who had been running and hiding. She worked carefully, and Tom noticed her confidence growing slightly with each task. It was a small victory, but in moments like these, small victories meant everything. As the sun began to dip behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Tom finally sat down beside Emily. He looked at her and spoke gently. "We have a long road ahead, but tonight we rest. You've been through a lot, and you need strength for tomorrow." Emily nodded, feeling the weight of his words and the comfort in them. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, she felt that she was not alone. Night fell, and Tom lit a lantern in the barn. The soft light created a warm, protective glow around them. He could see Emily's breathing even out as she began to relax. Outside, the ranch was quiet, but Tom remained vigilant, listening for any unusual sounds, ready to act if needed. He realized that protecting someone in danger required not only courage but also patience, observation, and clear thinking. Each decision mattered, and even small mistakes could have consequences. During the night, Emily spoke softly, almost to herself. "I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't found you," she said. Tom didn't respond immediately, letting her words settle. Then he replied in a calm voice, "You're safe here, at least for now. That's what matters. We'll take care of the rest together." The night was long, but for Emily, it was a night of rest she hadn't had in days. For Tom, it was a night of quiet vigilance, watching over someone else's life as if it were his own. He knew the challenges ahead would be difficult, but he also understood that courage sometimes appeared in the most ordinary people, at the most extraordinary moments. And tonight, both of them were learning what it meant to trust, to rely on another, and to find strength in unexpected places. By the time the first hints of dawn appeared on the horizon, Emily felt a mixture of hope and determination. She had survived the night, and for the first time she believed that she could face what was coming next. Tom, too, felt a renewed sense of purpose. Helping Emily was no longer just about offering shelter. It was about standing beside someone who needed protection, guidance, and understanding. Together they had faced the first challenge, and tomorrow would bring the next. The morning air was cool and crisp as Tom walked along the edge of the pasture, keeping a watchful eye on the surroundings. The events of the previous day weighed on his mind. Emily was safe for now, but he knew that the danger she had been fleeing from would not disappear on its own. Something in her eyes the night before told him that those pursuing her were determined, relentless, and perhaps desperate. He understood that protecting her would not be easy, and it required careful planning. Inside the barn, Emily moved quietly, trying not to disturb Tom as he made his preparations. She had been awake for a while, quietly observing him, learning the rhythms of his life. The previous day had given her a small measure of hope, but fear was never far from her mind. She knew that the people chasing her were still out there somewhere. Every sound from the wind through the trees, every rustle in the tall grass made her heart skip a beat. Tom noticed her nervous glances and sat down beside her. "We need to be careful today," he said softly. "I want to make sure that no one can find you, at least not until we know what to do next." "I need your trust, Emily. We have to work together." Emily nodded, her lips pressed tightly together. She wanted to trust him, but fear was a heavy burden. I'll do whatever you say," she whispered. Her voice was shaky, but there was a small spark of determination behind it. Tom could see that she was exhausted, but she was also willing to try. That willingness, he thought, could make the difference between success and failure. Tom began to explain his plan. The ranch had several hidden paths and small wooded areas that could be used to create barriers and diversions if needed. He intended to move Emily carefully, using these natural defenses to keep her out of sight. They would need to stay quiet, move slowly, and make sure that no trace of their path was left behind. Every step would require patience, observation, and calm thinking. They set off slowly, walking through the fields and into the small wooded area near the creek. The trees created a natural screen, and the soft rustle of leaves muffled their movements. Tom kept a close watch on Emily, making sure she didn't trip on roots or brush against thorns. Emily felt a strange mix of fear and trust. Fear because she knew danger could be nearby. Trust because she had come to realize that Tom was careful, experienced, and had her safety as his priority. As they moved deeper into the woods, Tom pointed out natural hiding spots and safe routes. "If anyone comes this way, these trees and the creek will help block their view," he explained. Emily listened closely, memorizing every detail. Each new piece of knowledge made her feel slightly stronger, slightly more in control of her own fate. Suddenly, a sound from the distance caught their attention, a faint, distant voice calling out. Emily froze, and Tom held up his hand to signal her to stay quiet. The voice faded quickly, but the warning was enough. They both understood that someone had been searching nearby. Tom's mind raced as he considered their options. They could either hide and wait for the threat to pass or create a diversion to ensure safety. Tom chose the latter. He led Emily to a shallow ditch covered with leaves and branches. "Stay here," he whispered. "I'll make sure no one comes close while you rest." He picked up a few large sticks and stones, moving them strategically to create a small barrier and make the path ahead appear undisturbed. Then, using his knowledge of the land, he created sounds in another area, a small trickle of water from a rock in the creek and rustling leaves, to suggest that someone had passed through the wrong way. Emily held her breath, watching him work. She had never seen anyone act so calmly in a dangerous situation. Every move he made was precise, careful, and purposeful. She began to understand that courage wasn't just about facing danger, it was also about planning, thinking ahead, and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Hours passed as they stayed hidden in the wooded area. The sounds of the ranch faded, replaced by the subtle noises of the forest, the distant crow of a bird, the rustle of small animals, and the gentle flow of the creek. Tom kept speaking softly to Emily, telling her stories about his life on the ranch to keep her mind occupied and calm. He spoke of childhood memories of animals he had raised, and of the quiet satisfaction of working the land. The stories distracted Emily from fear and reminded her that even in difficult times there could be moments of comfort and beauty. As the sun climbed higher, Tom realized they needed to make their next move. Staying hidden in the woods would only protect them temporarily. He decided to take Emily to a more secure part of the ranch, a small shed hidden behind thick trees and shrubs. The shed had a sturdy lock, extra supplies, and a vantage point to watch the surroundings without being seen. Tom explained the plan to Emily, and together they moved carefully, making sure every step was deliberate and silent. During the move, Emily stumbled over a tree root, and Tom caught her gently. "Careful," he said. "We're almost there." His calm voice reassured her. She felt a strange sense of safety even in the midst of uncertainty. For the first time since fleeing, she felt that someone truly cared about her well-being. They reached the shed by midday. Tom quickly secured it, checked the windows, and ensured that there were no visible traces of their movement outside. Emily was able to rest on a cot he had prepared, and she finally allowed herself to relax for a moment. Tom sat nearby, keeping watch, aware that the danger was not yet gone but determined to protect her with every ounce of his strength and knowledge. While Emily rested, Tom thought about what they needed to do next. The people chasing her were still out there, and he knew they could not rely solely on hiding. They would need to create a longer-term plan, one that included safe routes, emergency supplies, and perhaps a way to contact someone who could help. Tom also knew that he had to be ready to act if the threat approached closer. Every detail mattered, and every decision could make the difference between safety and harm. Emily began to ask questions cautiously. Who would come after me?" she whispered. Tom shook his head gently. "I don't know yet, and that's okay. We'll deal with that when the time comes. Right now we focus on keeping you safe." His words were reassuring, and Emily felt a tiny bit of the tension leave her body. She realized that she didn't need all the answers at this moment. She just needed to survive until the next step could be taken. The afternoon passed slowly, filled with quiet vigilance. Tom checked the surroundings repeatedly, ensuring that the shed remained concealed and that no signs of intrusion were visible. Emily helped where she could, learning small tasks that kept her occupied and gave her a sense of control over her own safety. Each shared action strengthened the trust between them, building a fragile but growing bond of mutual reliance. As evening approached, Tom decided to prepare for the night. He reinforced the shed with extra barriers, ensured that food and water were readily available, and created a small alarm system using noise-making objects to alert them if anyone approached. Every precaution was thoughtful, deliberate, and focused on Emily's safety. Emily watched him work, amazed at his resourcefulness and the careful consideration he put into every action. Night fell once again, and Tom lit a small lantern in the shed, casting a warm, protective glow around them. Emily finally allowed herself to breathe deeply, feeling safer than she had in days. She realized that Tom's calm presence, careful planning, and unwavering focus had given her hope. She began to understand that safety was not just a matter of distance from danger. It was a combination of preparation, vigilance and trust in someone willing to protect you. Tom spoke softly as he sat beside her. "We've made it through another day," he said. "Tomorrow we'll plan the next step. For now we rest. You've been very brave, Emily." She looked at him, eyes shining with gratitude and relief. "Thank you for everything," she whispered. Her words were simple, but they carried a deep, heartfelt appreciation that Tom understood completely. The night passed quietly, filled with careful listening and silent vigilance. Tom's thoughts remained focused on Emily's safety and the challenges that lay ahead. He knew that they could not remain hidden forever, but he also knew that courage and careful planning could help them face the danger without giving in to fear. Emily slept more soundly than she had in days, feeling the quiet reassurance of someone who truly cared for her. By the time the first light of morning touched the trees outside the shed, both of them were aware that the next day would bring new challenges, but there was also a growing sense of confidence. They had survived the immediate threat, learned to work together, and discovered a measure of trust that neither had expected. For Tom, the experience reinforced his belief that courage and compassion could appear in ordinary people, in extraordinary situations. For Emily, it offered hope that even in the darkest times, there were people willing to help, protect, and care. And so, as the sun rose over the horizon, Tom and Emily prepared themselves for whatever lay ahead, knowing that together, they could face the unknown with patience, courage, and determination. The day had barely begun when Tom realized that the threat was closer than he had first thought. The forest that bordered the ranch, which had seemed protective and quiet, was no longer entirely safe. Faint sounds of movement, distant voices carried on the wind, and broken twigs hinted that someone might be approaching. Tom felt a surge of concern. He had prepared well, but he knew instinctively that today would test both his courage and his careful planning. Inside the shed, Emily sensed his tension. She watched him, noting the way he moved with purpose, checking the barricades and the small vantage points he had created. "Tom, is something wrong?" she asked softly, her voice laced with fear. He looked at her, eyes steady, and said, "There's no need to panic, but we need to stay alert. Someone may be coming closer." Emily nodded, biting her lip. Her heart raced, but she tried to stay calm, trusting the man who had already protected her through so many tense moments. Tom crouched beside her and explained the plan. "We're going to stay in here for now. If anyone comes, we'll use the paths I showed you yesterday. You need to follow my lead exactly. Don't speak, don't make sudden movements. Do you understand?" She nodded again, feeling a strange mix of fear and trust. She had no idea what the day would bring, but she understood that Tom's calm presence and careful thinking gave her the best chance of staying safe. She could only hope that he was right and that his plan would work. Hours passed slowly. Every creak of a branch, every bird call, every rustle of leaves made Emily's heart pound. Tom remained calm, quietly checking every window, listening intently and making small adjustments to their hiding place. He moved with a precision born from years of experience on the ranch, and Emily silently admired him. It wasn't just his knowledge of the land. It was the way he remained composed under pressure, thinking clearly while keeping her safety as the top priority. Suddenly, a louder sound reached them, the snap of a branch, closer than before. Emily froze and Tom motioned for her to stay low. The distant voices grew slightly, as though the people had discovered that someone was on the property. Tom knew that their moment of hiding might be over, and he had to act fast. He whispered, "Stay here, trust me. I need to create a distraction so you can move safely." Emily's eyes widened. She wanted to protest, to say she could move with him, but the determination in his voice left no room for argument. She nodded silently, trying to steady her trembling hands and heart. She realized that this moment, terrifying as it was, required complete trust. Tom had already saved her once, and she believed he could do it again. Tom stepped outside the shed cautiously, using the trees and shadows to remain unseen. He moved with careful steps, deliberately breaking twigs and tossing small stones in a different direction to create misleading sounds. The people approaching paused, then followed the noises, moving away from the shed. Tom's mind raced as he considered the next steps. He could not risk letting Emily stay in one place too long, nor could he allow the pursuers to discover her. He returned to the shed and whispered to Emily, "We have a chance. We need to move quickly now. Stay close, follow my lead, and do exactly as I say." Emily swallowed her fear and rose slowly, keeping low as they slipped out of the shed. Tom led her along a narrow path through the trees, using every natural feature to shield them. The sound of the pursuers grew fainter, but they both knew that safety was not guaranteed yet. As they moved deeper into the forest, Tom noticed a small clearing ahead. It was risky, open space, but it led to another hidden path that would give them better cover and a route toward the back of the ranch, where an old, forgotten cabin stood. "Almost there," he whispered. Emily followed silently, focusing on his movements. Every step was careful, deliberate, and precise. She realized that courage wasn't just about facing danger. It was also about trusting someone who had experience, someone willing to take risks for her safety. Suddenly, a voice shouted from behind them. "Hey, stop!" The sound made Emily freeze, her heart pounding in terror. Tom turned his head slightly, assessing the situation in a split second. He realized that the pursuers had discovered the distraction he had created earlier. There was no time to hesitate. He grabbed Emily's hand and pulled her toward a narrow ditch hidden by tall grass. They dropped down quietly, holding their breath. Tom whispered, "Stay low. We're not safe yet. I need to lead them away." Emily's eyes filled with fear, but she nodded. She understood that he was risking himself to give her a chance to escape. The reality of the situation hit her. Tom was putting himself directly in danger so she could live. The thought made her both afraid and profoundly grateful. Tom crept out of the ditch slowly, making deliberate noises in a different direction to lure the pursuers away. Emily watched from her hiding place, heart in her throat, as he moved farther and farther into the open, drawing attention to himself. She could barely see him, but she could hear the rustling of footsteps behind him. Every second felt like an eternity. Then she saw it, the unthinkable act. Tom stopped, turned slightly, and made a bold, decisive move to mislead the pursuers completely. He used a combination of shadows, rocks, and movements to convince them that he had gone in one direction, while in reality, he circled around to create a clear path for Emily. His plan was dangerous, and if he had miscalculated, he could have been caught. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she realized what he was doing. He was willing to risk himself entirely to give her a chance to escape. Once Tom had led the pursuers far enough, he signaled to Emily to follow the hidden path to the back of the ranch. Emily moved carefully, her legs shaking from both fear and adrenaline. She kept her eyes on the path, following every turn Tom had shown her, moving quietly but quickly. She realized that survival depended on complete trust, and she clung to the knowledge that Tom had been planning and thinking every step of the way. When Emily reached the old cabin, she paused to catch her breath. The cabin was small and sturdy, surrounded by thick trees and shrubs. Tom soon joined her, looking slightly worn but calm. He had successfully created a diversion, misled the pursuers, and ensured that Emily had a safe place to rest. She looked at him, overwhelmed with gratitude and awe. You saved me," she whispered. "I don't know how to thank you." Tom shook his head gently. "No thanks needed. We just need to be careful from here. You're safe for now, and that's what matters." He began checking the cabin, making sure the windows and doors were secure, setting up supplies and a small area where Emily could rest. Emily watched quietly, realizing that he had thought of everything: food, water, hiding places, and even a way to listen for approaching danger. The rest of the day passed with careful planning and quiet observation. Tom taught Emily small ways to remain hidden, how to listen for sounds that could indicate someone approaching, and how to stay calm under pressure. Emily absorbed every detail, her fear slowly transforming into cautious confidence. She realized that even in terrifying circumstances, thoughtful actions and careful planning could make the difference between safety and danger. By evening, the cabin felt like a temporary sanctuary. The warm glow of the lanterns, the smell of clean blankets, and the quiet presence of someone she trusted gave Emily a sense of comfort she had not felt in days. Tom sat beside her, speaking softly about simple things: stories from the ranch, memories of past seasons, and even small jokes that made her laugh quietly. For a few hours, fear was replaced with a fragile sense of normalcy. As night fell, the reality of what had happened during the day settled in. Emily realized that Tom had risked his life for hers. The thought was overwhelming. She had been alone, running from danger, and now, through no choice of her own, someone had stepped into her life to protect her. The feeling of gratitude was deep and complicated. mingled with awe and a quiet sorrow for the situation that had forced them both into such extreme circumstances. Tom, too, reflected on the events of the day. He had always lived a quiet, simple life on the ranch. He had never imagined that he would face a situation that required such courage, planning, and selflessness. But in the moment, he had acted without hesitation, knowing that the right choice was to protect someone who could not protect herself. He felt a quiet pride not in himself but in the power of human courage and compassion to rise in unexpected moments. By the time the moon rose high in the sky, casting silver light through the trees, Emily finally allowed herself to rest fully. Tom remained vigilant, sitting near the door listening and ready to act if needed. The night was long, but for both of them it was also a night of profound understanding. Courage could appear in ordinary people, and trust could be built even in the darkest hours. As the cabin grew silent, Emily whispered almost to herself, "I don't know what I would have done without him." Tom, hearing her words, simply nodded silently, aware that the unthinkable had been done, and that their bond of trust and shared courage had been solidified forever. The first light of dawn filtered gently through the trees surrounding the small cabin. Tom stirred quietly, careful not to wake Emily, who had slept more soundly than she had in days. The events of the past 2 days weighed heavily on both of them, but for the first time there was a sense of calm. The immediate danger had passed, at least for now, and the forest around the cabin seemed peaceful, almost protective. Emily woke slowly, stretching and rubbing her eyes. She looked around and saw the small space Tom had prepared for her. Blankets neatly arranged, water and food within reach, and a quiet order that made her feel safe. For a moment she allowed herself to breathe fully, realizing that she was alive and that someone had gone to great lengths to protect her. Tom was already up, moving quietly, checking the surroundings and preparing a light breakfast. His calm, steady presence gave her reassurance. "Good morning," he said softly. "Sleep well?" Emily nodded, her voice small but clear. "I think so. Thank you. Again." "You don't need to thank me," Tom replied with a gentle smile. "We just need to plan the next step." They ate a simple breakfast together and Tom explained what they would do that day. The immediate danger had passed, but it was not gone entirely. They needed to ensure Emily could reach safety without encountering the people who had chased her. Tom had thought through several possibilities, moving carefully along hidden paths, using the dense forest to stay out of sight, and perhaps eventually contacting the authorities once they were in a more secure location. Emily listened closely, absorbing every detail. She understood that planning, patience, and careful movement were essential. After breakfast, they packed a small bag with food, water, and essential supplies. Tom showed Emily how to move quietly through the forest, avoiding open areas, listening carefully to the sounds around them, and keeping track of the safest routes. Emily practiced learning to step softly, observe her surroundings, and anticipate potential dangers. Each step was careful, deliberate, and slow, but it gave her a sense of empowerment that she had not felt in days. They set off along a narrow, hidden path. The trees provided a natural screen, and Tom led the way, pointing out small details, an unusual rock formation that could serve as a marker, a fallen branch that could be used as a shield, and the sound of distant water that could help mask their movements. Emily followed closely, trusting him completely. She realized that courage was not only about facing danger, but also about relying on someone you trusted and acting carefully to protect yourself. As they moved, Tom spoke softly, sharing stories to distract Emily from fear. He spoke of his childhood on the ranch, of animals he had raised, and of the quiet moments he had spent watching sunsets over the fields. The stories were ordinary yet comforting. Emily began to feel a fragile sense of hope. For the first time in a long while, she believed that she could make it to safety. Hours passed. They navigated carefully through the forest, occasionally pausing to rest and drink water. Tom kept a vigilant eye on the surroundings, listening for sounds that could indicate danger. Emily, though tired, began to understand the rhythm of the forest, how to move silently and how to trust her instincts. The bond between them grew stronger, built on shared experience, trust, and the knowledge that they had relied on each other to survive. By late afternoon, they reached a small clearing that led to the back of the ranch, where the terrain was more open but still hidden by trees and shrubs. Tom instructed Emily to remain low and move slowly. while he scouted ahead briefly to ensure the path was clear. He returned a few minutes later, signaling that it was safe to continue. Emily's confidence grew, strengthened by the calm, careful guidance of the man who had saved her life. Eventually, they reached a part of the property where they could see the distant road leading toward the town. Tom stopped, crouching beside Emily. "From here, you can travel safely if you follow the paths I showed you," he explained. "Once you're on the main road, there will be more people and you'll be able to reach someone who can help." Emily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I don't know how to thank you for everything," she whispered. Tom shook his head gently. "No thanks needed. Just promise me you'll stay careful and follow the path. That's enough." The two of them shared a quiet moment, the forest around them serene and protective. Emily realized that in a few days she might be back in the chaos of the world, but for now she felt a sense of safety she had not known in a long time. Tom's courage, calm thinking, and unwavering presence had given her hope and strength. As they prepared to part ways, Tom handed Emily a small map of the safe routes he had memorized. "Follow this carefully," he said. "Stay hidden where you need to and trust yourself. You're stronger than you think." Emily held the map tightly, her hands trembling slightly, and nodded. She understood that this guidance was more than just directions. It was a symbol of trust, protection, and the bond they had formed. Emily began to move along the path Tom had shown her, her steps careful and deliberate. She glanced back once, seeing Tom standing quietly among the trees, watching until she was safely out of immediate sight. Her heart swelled with gratitude and admiration. He had risked so much to protect her, and his actions would remain with her forever. As Emily reached the main road, she spotted a passing car. She waved cautiously, signaling for help. The driver stopped, and Emily explained her situation briefly, careful not to reveal unnecessary details. The driver offered to take her to the nearest safe place, and Emily accepted, knowing that she was finally moving toward safety. Meanwhile, Tom returned to the ranch, quietly reflecting on what had happened. He had faced a situation he had never anticipated, acted with courage and careful thinking, and protected someone in need. The events of the past days had changed him too. He realized that courage, compassion, and trust could emerge in ordinary people during extraordinary circumstances. He returned to his quiet life on the ranch, but he knew that he would never forget Emily or the experience they had shared. Later, Emily left a small note for Tom at the local authorities' office expressing her gratitude. She wrote about how his calmness, courage, and careful planning had saved her life. Tom never sought recognition, but he read the note when it arrived, feeling a quiet satisfaction. He knew that what mattered most was that Emily was safe, alive, and able to continue her life. That was the reward he valued more than any praise. The experience had left both of them forever changed. Emily had learned the power of trust, courage, and careful planning in the face of fear. Tom had learned that ordinary people could rise to extraordinary challenges, that courage could appear when least expected, and that helping someone in need could transform a life, both theirs and the person they helped. In the days and weeks that followed, Emily rebuilt her life, strengthened by the knowledge that someone had risked everything for her safety. She carried with her the lessons learned on the ranch: patience, observation, trust, and courage. And though she might never see Tom again, his actions remained etched in her heart as a symbol of human kindness and bravery. Tom, meanwhile, returned to his ranch with a renewed sense of purpose. The animals, fields, and quiet routines remained his home, but he knew that life could call for extraordinary courage at any moment. He continued his daily tasks with the same calm dedication as before, but he carried with him the memory of the unthinkable act he had performed, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. The story of that week on the ranch became a quiet legend, remembered by both of them in different ways. Emily never forgot the courage and care that had protected her, and Tom never forgot the trust and resilience of someone who had been pushed to the edge but survived. It was a story of humanity, bravery, and the bonds that can form between people even in the most unexpected circumstances. In the end, the forest around the ranch returned to its usual quiet. The wind whispered through the trees, the creek flowed steadily, and the animals grazed peacefully in the fields. Life continued calm and steady, But both Tom and Emily carried within them the profound realization that ordinary people could do extraordinary things, and that courage and kindness could change lives forever. And though they had walked separate paths after that week, the memory of trust, courage, and the unthinkable act would always connect them, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope, humanity, and bravery could prevail.